What's up, everyone? Sam Shaw here, founder of Wall Street Mastermind. Excited to be back today with another client interview for you guys. Today we have Alex on with us, and I'm excited to have Alex here with us because he actually just finished going through the summer internship recruiting process and was able to land a role in real estate private equity, which is, like somewhat, I mean, PE banking. Like we have clients that kind of go into both. But I know like sometimes I do get questions from people that are specifically interested in going into real estate. So I think for those of you that kind of like fit that description, this interview will be hopefully pretty insightful for you guys. So Alex, first of all, thank you for just taking the time to be here with us today, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to.
Awesome. So like to start off, maybe you could just introduce yourself real quick, give people a sense of kind of like what your background is and who you are, and then we can kind of take it from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Alex. Just wrapped up my sophomore year. First joined Wall Street Mastermind last year, summer after my freshman year. Was at a target school. First year grades weren't that great and knew I wanted to pursue finance, investment banking, or real estate or private equity going out of college, and knew that I'd have an uphill battle a bit with the grades and, not having a ton of finance experience. So, I reached out to the team and learned more about Wall Street Mastermind that summer and jumped on board last year.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. I guess before we kind of go into everything, what was the outcome of your recruiting process? Because I think you got a couple of different offers, right?
Yeah. So like I cast a pretty wide net, like all over investment banking and real estate private equity. So like towards the end of it, like finally got an offer from Deloitte Corporate Finance, so middle market investment banking, and then kind of used that to speed up processes at other places. And then when I got the offer from Starwood Capital for real estate private equity, took that offer and wrapped up the process.
Got it. Okay, so that's where you're going to be going is to Starwood.
Yeah.
That's a great offer. I mean, they're for people that are not familiar, they're really good in that space, right? Like they're one of the top players in real estate private equity, basically. And like how competitive was that? I think we were like talking about this before we came on here, but like how big of a class do they typically hire per
Yeah,
year?
for their New York office, I think HR told me they took around like a little less than 10 interns for 2023. So super lean team. They don't really hire a ton from undergrad too, and it's pretty school specific too. So yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy because I mean less than 10. I wonder how many applicants they had, but I mean less than 10 in the entire country is definitely very, very selective. So that's awesome. That's a great accomplishment. So let's start from the beginning then. Like for because again, like you said, you joined Wall Street Mastermind summer between freshman and sophomore year, right? So prior to Wall Street Mastermind, like during your freshman year, um, what were some of the things you were already doing to kind of like work towards getting into either investment banking or private equity? Like, were you already like networking or studying on your own, or like stacking your resume, or like what were some of the things you were doing, if any, or like was Wall Street Mastermind kind of like your first foray into kind of the preparation process?
Yeah, I think everything I did up to then, like through freshman year, was through like the investment club on campus, finance orgs, because I'm an econ major. We don't have a finance major. So in terms of like technicals and everything, like we didn't really have anything outside our club. So that was all the support I had, like upperclassmen giving me guides and whatever like that. So technicals was a worry of mine. So that was one inciting reason. As for like internships, I did have an internship lined up for that summer. It wasn't super finance related. It was actually like in real estate. So yeah, pretty much just had that internship lined up, was in a couple clubs, but that was pretty much it. But wanted to get on strong footing going into sophomore year. So that's what kind of prompted it.
Got it. So then, like, what made you want to join Wall Street Mastermind at that time? Like, what was the, I guess, like, what was the mentality that you had at the time? I mean, because like, not everyone, looks for something like Wall Street Mastermind when they decide to prep for recruiting, right? So, like, what made you want to do that? And then also, like, I'm not sure how you found out about us, but as you were kind of like evaluating this opportunity and probably like deciding whether you want to join or not, like, like, did you have any like skepticism, or like, were you worried like, hey, is this thing legit, or like kind of like walk us through kind of your mindset at the time?
Yeah, I mean, I think like I mentioned earlier, like my biggest weakness was definitely GPA. Like went to a target school, had good extracurriculars and internships, but was just really worried about that GPA because I know like especially with the elite boutiques, like that's a hard no for a lot of people. Like it wasn't ridiculously low, it was around like a 3.6 at the time, but I just felt like I needed that extra guidance and help just to like, I really didn't want to risk it because I knew what an important, role this outcome would play in like my life. So I just heard about Wall Street Mastermind through like online channels. It might have been like YouTube ads. I know there's a ton of those. But heard about it through that. Scheduled the initial call. Um, I think it was actually with a past Wall Street Mastermind like student. So like getting to hear his experience. He went to a non-target school and just hearing about his recruiting experience, his outcome, the resources it provided. That's kind of what prompted me.
Got it. Okay, so you knew someone else that had been in the program before.
No, he was actually the guy that I talked to during my consulting call. Yeah.
Oh, got it, got it, got it, got it. Okay, right. Oh yeah, you spoke to. I'm just looking at it now. You spoke to Noah. I see.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Got it. Okay, so then like you spoke to Noah. He had actually gone to. He had obviously gone through the process and was very successful with himself, and so that gave you confidence that this was a program that could potentially help you as well. Essentially.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Um, so then like you joined Wall Street Mastermind that summer, and then like kind of walk us, I mean, shoot, that was like a year ago, I
Yeah.
guess. Looking back now, like almost exactly a year ago today.
Yeah.
So walk us through kind of like what's been going on in the past year. Once you've joined Wall Street Mastermind, like what were some of the things that you did to as you were working towards this goal? What did you find to be like the most helpful, and like I think like in hindsight, now that you've gone through the process, um, what would you say are some of like the biggest differences between what you did through the program versus like maybe what you could have just done on your own?
Yeah, for sure. I think like the biggest thing for me, started it like before sophomore year, so had all summer to like kind of go through the modules. So like went through that pretty meticulously and gradually throughout that. So really built up the technicals and behaviorals and applications and networking knowledge through that. And built that foundation over the summer. And then like heading into the fall semester, that's when I really started networking and just getting started with that. Like, it was a gradual process that kind of accelerated through sophomore year. And I think like the biggest differentiator for me was always, our Slack channel, like just having the opportunity to like send a message and like the big chats, like technicals or behaviorals, and have like any other Wall Street Mastermind member potentially answer that question. But also like, I'd like come to you once in a while for like emails, like if I'm drafting an important email, like just for advice, just to get that second look and second opinion. Like that was always super beneficial for me, just to have that assurance going into like some of those important decisions.
Got it. So like when you talk about the Slack channel, I guess like for people that are outside of Wall Street Mastermind and kind of like maybe don't know what that means, like can you describe that a little bit more? Like why was that so helpful, I guess?
Yeah, so I mean, every Wall Street Mastermind member gets access to a Slack like channel, like, and there are multiple different like chats, I guess, different rooms, like one for technical questions, one for behaviorals, and then of course you get the private chat with the coaches where you ask personal questions. And like if you have like a broad technical question, one that you came across in like a guide or just in an interview, even like you can just put that question in the chat, and you have the possibility for Sam to answer it or for anyone in the community to answer it, and just kind of crowdsourcing those questions is super helpful. And crowdsourcing a lot of different things like the interview database, that's obviously super helpful. People putting in their interview questions so you can see what that firm historically looks like in interviews. Like all those processes are super helpful.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, I mean, it's really like leveraging the power of the community, because we've had, hundreds of students, I guess as of today, almost 600 students that have either gone through the program or are currently in the program. And a lot of these people are now, alumni who are working at these banks, or even upperclassmen that have already gone through the process and have secured offers from these banks, but not yet started. And everybody's kind of going through the process together and helping each other out. Uh, and I think that the thing that I love the most about it is that so many of the people that have already gone through the process, they're still in there helping the younger students, like Daniel Stone for him, like he's like always answering people's questions, even though he's already like working in banking and he doesn't have to do that, right? And I think like that's really an amazing thing because recruiting, I mean, you can probably attest to this, but like recruiting can be a very lonely process most of the
Yeah.
time. And it's a pretty cutthroat environment out there where there are only so many jobs and most people are kind of just like looking out for themselves. And a lot of times people are keep things pretty close to their vest and they're not really trying to like help everyone else out because they're competing with you. Right. And so like, I think like to be able to have the type of support network that exists here in Wall Street Mastermind, I think for a lot of our students, it's tremendous because you can have, I mean, I don't know, you tell me like how often do you think like I should go into the recruiting process, like how often do you think you had like a question pop up that was like you were wondering like, oh, what's the answer to this, or oh, I wonder how to do this? Like would you say that's on like a daily basis or weekly basis or monthly basis, or like what would you say is like the cadence?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely wasn't one of the most active people in terms of asking questions, but like, I mean, I'd pop into the chat every day and look through what other people had to ask because that's always super helpful too, right? Seeing like, sometimes you don't come up with the best questions, but someone else does, and that's something that'll help you down the line. Like I remember like very distinctly, like a couple months ago, someone asked a question, like a very specific technical question about like a SaaS company with like a subscription service and how that would flow through the three statements. And like, I was reading all the replies to that. Like I would never have thought of that question, but like I got asked a very similar question in an interview months later. So like things like that are really helpful.
Yeah, you made a really good point, which is a lot of times if you're doing this on your own, you're responsible for figuring out all the questions that you might need answers to. But I think a lot of times the questions that we need answers to the most are actually questions that we're not even aware of because like you don't know what you don't know,
Yeah.
right? And so to your point, like I do like when we onboard people, we always encourage everyone's like, hey, do exactly what you said, right? Which is like, hey, even if you don't have any questions that you want to ask, at least just like make it a habit to like check in the channel once a day just to see what other people are asking.
Yeah.
And a lot of times like you learn more from the questions that other people ask than the questions that you ask yourself, right?
Yeah.
It's the same idea with like our office hours where we get on a small group call on Zoom and we do Q&A in person, and even if you don't have questions and you can like hear the questions that other people are asking, like that's we're almost like recreating the learning environment that you get in school, but like except we're just focused on like it's almost like this is just like a course that's not offered by your school. It's on like how to get a job in investment banking, right? And I think like if you have a group of like-minded peers who are also very supportive and are constantly helping each other out and sharing intel, sharing interview questions, sharing like, where different banks are at in the recruiting timeline, so on and so forth. Like that just makes the process so much like easier. And I think like also like it can be very motivational, right? To see that like all these other people are trying to do the same things that I'm trying to do. And like I'm not struggling alone, basically. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess aside from like the Slack channel, the community, the network, like crowdsourcing all the intel, things like that. Like if I mean like the four main areas that we worked on were like, your application materials, your networking skills, your behavioral interviews, and your technical interviews, right? So like out of those, like what would you say were like your weakest areas and kind of like the areas that you got the most out of, where like you made the biggest improvements in?
Yeah, I think technical is definitely my weakest area, just because like I mentioned, not a finance major, don't have that curriculum at school. So just having, like, I think the biggest differentiator, like obviously I used the guides too, went through those questions, but the way like the modules are formatted, it's just a lot more straightforward, a lot more simplified, and I think it's a lot more approachable for someone without that background. And I felt like, just having those to always fall back on, even as I delved more into the more advanced material, like that was super helpful in me building my technical skills.
Yeah.
And beyond that, like the other thing, like not that this was a particular weakness, but like just like in terms of having like the coaches that like review the resume and our behavioral script, like, you know, the fact that we actually write out our answers for behaviorals and get that feedback on written answers
Right.
really helps you kind of polish those going into an interview. So I thought that was super helpful.
Got it. Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, on a technical side, I think the question that people always have is like, okay, so like the technical stuff you're learning in Wall Street Mastermind, I mean, it's the same concepts that you will learn from anywhere else, right? Because it's not like, I mean, like a DCF is a DCF is a DCF, like, you know,
Yeah.
three statements. So it's like, why is it that it sounds like you're saying using like learning it through our curriculum made it a lot easier for you than say maybe like just using the popular interview guides or I don't know what like financial modeling courses that people take. Like, what is it specifically that makes the process easier for you? Like, given that they are the same concepts, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think like with the technical specifically, I think it's just like the way you have them formatted, like it's a very logical, you know, timeline, like the way you go through everything, it's broken up into short videos. Like, I don't think there's very many videos longer than like 15-20 minutes. And like the fact that you go through it like that, there's a lot of different ways that you deliver the content. I think like there's like, I think in the module, the way it's formatted, the first video is like a very long video, 2 hours, like a high level overview of everything you need to know, like all the technicals. And I think just like it's a very like well thought out formatting in terms of conveying that information and conveying what's most important and relevant, because I feel like a lot of the things I learned like through my investment club or through different guides weren't relevant. Like I would have never been asked that in an interview. Whereas like I remember like my sophomore summer, actually this like a month after I joined Wall Street Mastermind, I somehow got a super day for like Bank of America's sophomore program, which I hadn't networked for, kind of just applied, like just joined the program, didn't expect to get it, but like was not prepared for a super day at all. And like you kind of like told me which videos were most important, kind of did a crash course in like 3 days just to prep myself for that super day. And you know, like I didn't get the offer, but like my super day went flawlessly, didn't get a single question wrong. And just like knowing that the program kind of like targets what's most important and most relevant because it recognizes that a lot of the students that are joining are pressed for time. So just, you know, that balance.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think like, I mean, regardless of whether students join our program or not, what we found is that 99% of the time, people who are recruiting for investment banking feel like they're pressed for time.
Yeah.
It just is what it is because the recruiting timeline is so rushed these days. They keep pushing it up earlier and earlier. And there's just so much you have to get done, right? I mean, think about like what it takes to be a qualified candidate for investment banking. Is like you gotta maintain your grades in school, which already is basically like, you know, a full-time job for like
Yeah.
being a student, right? You got to build up your resume with all these relevant experiences. You do internships a lot of times during the school year on top of your classes, joining clubs, investment clubs, like you said, taking on leadership positions. You got to network with bankers. You got to learn your behaviorals. You got to learn your technicals. Like there's just a lot going on. And
Yeah.
the fact that recruiting starts as early as like, you know, Q4 of your sophomore year, like nowadays, like before your sophomore year is even halfway over, before the end of your first semester, like a lot of these applications are opening up already. So it's like, you just don't have that much time. And so
Yeah.
you're right that like the way we try to teach everything is like, how do we just cut away all the fluff and only focus on the things that really truly matter and are going to move the needle. And then like, you know, our goals, I think our entire technical curriculum, I mean, to go through it once only takes like 20 something hours, right?
Yeah.
Which is like almost like that's as condensed as it's going to get, right? But like the name of the game is efficiency when it comes to recruiting. I feel like it's like most people that fail, they don't fail because this is like rocket science and they can't learn it or something. It's like if I gave you all the time in the world, everyone could probably eventually learn what they need to learn. The problem is you don't have all the time in the world, and most people aren't able to juggle all of these competing priorities simultaneously, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's a really good point. In terms of like, you mentioned like writing out your behavioral answers and then like getting feedback on the written answers. Um, did you see a big difference between kind of like your initial draft of your answers versus like what ended up being the final draft of what you ended up using? And like I asked this because I feel like behavioral interviews is one of those things where if you ask most people, like whether their behavioral answers are good, most people usually think like, yeah, my behavioral answers are pretty good. And there's like not that
Yeah.
much to change about it. Right.
Yeah.
So like, what was your experience with that?
Yeah, I thought what was most helpful for me was like on that document that we kind of fill out, like I just threw as much content out there as possible because I didn't know, like obviously you're pressed for time in an interview, so I didn't know what content was most beneficial, most valuable. So
Yeah.
the thing I gained most out of having it looked at was Mindy, she would like tell me which story is the best to use, or like for a current event, which current event's better. Like, just tuning that content, kind of distilling it into like, a more digestible like size, something that you can say faster, something that's actually usable in an interview. Because you're not going to talk for like 2 minutes nonstop. Like, these are like, it's a conversation at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So basically like being able to have a sounding board for, hey, I have all these different ideas for what I could potentially use as answers, like which one of these are actually best, or like what do the bankers actually prefer to hear?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, like, because that is one of the biggest challenges for people that have to recruit, is that they don't know if they should um, like sometimes like they have an example prepared for what they want to use for an answer, but they don't have a high degree of confidence that they're actually using the right example, right?
Mhm.
And if you don't have that type of feedback, then the best you can do is just kind of like just go into the interview and hope for the best, which is like not really like the best strategy, right?
Yeah,
Uh, so I think like being able to get that feedback ahead of time is really really crucial, especially because like most candidates, like they're just going through recruiting for the first time, like they don't have a lot of experience with interviewing. Like how are you supposed to know what the bankers want to hear?
yeah,
So and it's not as simple as just like regurgitating like the exact answer that you read from, I don't know, the 400 questions guide, right? Like think about how many people are reading those guides, and like if you're just using the answer directly out of those guides, like every single person is doing that. And that's what you should do if you don't want to stand out, which is like the
yeah.
opposite of what we were trying to accomplish. So um but okay, so that makes sense. I guess obviously in the end, like it worked out for you. So like now that you're on the other side and you've gotten this offer that is like honestly very very selective, um looking back on the process, like is there one piece of advice that you have for people who are maybe going through the recruiting process now or just starting to go through the process? Like maybe something that someone told you along the way that really made a big difference for you or really helped you a lot. Like, is there anything like that that you want to share with people?
Yeah, I think my biggest takeaway was definitely cast a wide net. Like going into it, like, I'd always had an interest in real estate, but like, like when you're in college, when you're in school, like everyone's talking about IB, right? So like going into it, like first, like in the start of spring, I probably just applied to like elite boutiques and bulge brackets. And then I started to get nervous because like, I didn't hear from a few. And then I started expanding to middle market, like Deloitte corporate finance. Never thought I would have applied there. Never thought I would have considered middle market and probably wouldn't have taken the offer. But at the end of the day, that offer is what allowed me to accelerate so many other processes and help me get the Starwood offer. And I'd probably like now looking at it, obviously, like I think Starwood, I'd choose over a good amount of the banks if I'd gotten offers. But, going into it, like wasn't really applying to real estate private equity. It was something I only did later. But like looking back, like it was a great decision for me in the long run just to get that offer now, not have to recruit for the buy side after going into banking. So
Yeah.
just like you never know what's going to happen. Like keep all your options open just by applying everywhere. Like it can never hurt.
Yeah. Um, One thing that you said there that kind of like piqued my interest, like, so I think I know the answer, but just for the sake of our audience, like when you said Starwood is something that you would take over a lot of the banks, like what goes into that decision? Like when you're thinking about, would I rather work at Starwood or would I rather start my career directly in real estate private equity versus would I rather start my career in investment banking first? Like what goes into, like what are the considerations, I guess?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I was talking to a senior, and I think like his response was like put it perfectly into perspective for me. Like he basically, like, I interviewed with Bank of America too around then, and he was like, Bank of America is one of the best real estate groups on the street. Like, let's just say you got placed in the real estate group, one of their better groups, and let's say you worked at Bank of America. And he was like, I bet you all the guys in that real estate group are trying to recruit for Starwood after 2 years, and some of them aren't going to get the offer. So like, why would you take that risk? And that put it into perspective for me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point, which is like, you're right. A lot of people go into banking with the intention of exiting to the buy side. And so like, if you can get a good buy side offer right off the bat, then you have to evaluate like, I mean, how much more upside is there if I were to start my career in banking, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like in this case, because there's a lot more downside than upside, so you might as well just go straight to the buy side. And I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think like this is a case by case thing. Like obviously, I'm not saying like you should always go buy side first, but like if your buy side offer is from, I don't know, like a much smaller firm, then you might come to a different conclusion, right? But in your case, it's already such a reputable firm. It's one of the top players in its space, and so it's like it just doesn't really get much better than that, right?
Yeah.
I guess one last question that I ask you, which I don't typically ask, but since like this is since you are going kind of like a more unique route, for those people in our audience that are like kind of more interested in going down the real estate path, in your experience, like how different were the real estate PE interviews versus kind of like your traditional banking interview, and like what kind of incremental prep did you have to do, if any, to kind of like make yourself ready for this type of interview?
Yeah, I think because there are fewer spots and fewer interested people, just because of how niche it is, they definitely, like every single one, they're really going to push you on why real estate. Like you really need to show why you have that. Like, do you have a background? Like, I don't think anyone could really get in without a background, but if you don't have a background, like you really have to like justify like why you want to be in real estate because it is that niche. And also like from a technicals perspective, it's completely different. Like I don't think I got a single IB technical intern like question during my Starwood interviews. Like they have their own set of technicals that are very simple, to be honest. Like they're really straightforward. But the thing is, you need to know to prep for them. Like I only knew because of an upperclassman that I knew who recruited for real estate. Like they're very simple, like cap rates and cash on cash yields. It's like very basic math, but you should just know to prep for them. I think that's the biggest hurdle for a lot of people.
Got it. Okay. Cap rates, cash on cash. So these are, I mean, it's basically you're just saying like in real estate, I mean, they're still looking at valuation multiples, but the multiples are different than like your traditional like revenue multiple or EBITDA multiple or PE, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Got it. And so like knowing those types of nuances between real estate versus like your traditional investment banking industries is important. But I guess like those are the two biggest things then. It's like having a great reason for why real estate, and then like knowing some like the real estate specific technicals. And if you can do that, then you're pretty much in good shape.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. It's really helpful. So guys, I think for those of you that are still with us, like, if you are like currently going through the recruiting process, or maybe you're about to go through it, and maybe you're in a similar position, like, maybe you feel like your GPA is, not as high as you would like it to be, or you don't have a whole lot of finance experience because you're just starting out, and you're like wondering how you can just be as prepared as possible and just like be the most competitive candidate, then I want to encourage you to reach out to our team. And I mean, like, we can't work with everyone, so it is by application only. But like, if you want to apply, like the first step would be to book a call, and you'll most likely speak to one of the alumni that's already gone to the program first, so that they can like I mean, it's just free virtual coffee chat. They can like answer whatever questions you have about recruiting. They can like, you can ask them about their experience in Wall Street National if you want to. Just whatever. It's just like any networking call you do with like an upperclassman, right? And after that, if you're still interested in our program, and you want to apply and want to work with us, they can set you up with our team, and we can learn more about your situation, figure out what it is that you need help with, how much help you need, and based on what you tell us, we can give you like an honest assessment of whether we're the best fit to help you. And if we are, happy to help you with the process. But even if we aren't, we'll still do our best to just at least give you some advice on what we think we would do if we were you. Okay, so If you're interested in doing that, you can go to www.wallstreetmastermind.com/apply. The street is abbreviated to ST, so it's wallstmastermind.com/apply. And we look forward to talking to you. All right. With that said, Alex, I want to thank you again for taking the time out of your day to just like share your experience with us, share all these insights, especially regarding to real estate, private equity recruiting, which I think there are actually a decent amount of people out there that are interested in this. So yeah, and also huge congrats again on obviously a phenomenal offer, to be one of less than 10 people in the entire country to get these offers. Like that's again really like quite the accomplishment, that and I'm sure you're really proud of it, and we're really proud of you as well. And we can't wait to see what you accomplish during both like this next summer as well as beyond during full time. So congrats again, and thank you for letting us be just a part of your journey, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Sam.
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, so we're gonna wrap it up here. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll be back with more of these for you guys in the near future. And until next time. All right, bye.